Well, those of you, however you found my channel, as small as it is, very small, I should say. I'm fairly new up here, uh, but I felt like since I just kind of got these games back after not having them for so long, and get back into playing these games, I haven't quite missed a beat on them. So I still pretty much know all these games quite well. But even though a lot of people do know about, the Kotor series, there's always new players that get around that might be trying these games for the first time. So compared to what you might be used to out there today, I consider this game dates back to 2003. That's a long time, since this game came out. So there's been quite a few years and a lot of different games that people have played since this game. So you have to figure, uh, there's always going to be someone new. Okay, so when you first jump into this game, uh, basically what this video is going to cover mostly is a basic guide to the class guide. Now, this is not a video, I want to put this for the record, that this is not a guide giving, somebody recommendations how they should go about building or what they should do for their character, that sort of thing. This is not that kind of video. I will do each class individually and go more in depth with them. But what this video is primarily for is for new players, for beginners, basically people that are fairly new. It's more like a basic rundown of how you want to customize your character. And we're going to go over everything from what attributes to skills to feats to so many different things like that, and ultimately what Jedi path you could take from Jedi Guardian to Sentinel to Jedi Counselor. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the character creation screen. So when you first come in, the first thing you're going to notice is different classes, and they're all the same for male and female. Now, in older Bioware games like Kotor, and there's another game called Jade Empire, is kind of based like that. You don't get to create a character in these games. Instead, you have to cycle through a pre-selected models from male to female. If you're used to modern graphics, yeah, some of them you might be a little bit disappointed at what you might see. But, some of these guys are actually okay looking for the most part. You kind of have to lower your expectations a little bit when you get into a game like this. So, but once you find a person that you like, regardless of each class, it just comes down to who you like. And then just kind of go from there. And it's all the same for the rest. I tend to like more on the females, but they all kind of work out in a certain aspect. You scroll through until you find different ones you like, and then just kind of go from there. So now, before I get into everything else about what attributes are, how to go about customizing them the way you see fit, I need to explain each of the three classes in a short little detail. The soldier, I'll start with them, and then I'll go with the scout, and then I'll go with the scoundrel and last. But the quick rundown to basically describe a soldier is basically the tank. They could deal the most damage, and they could also take the most damage out of the three base classes. But however, they're not necessarily the most mobile, have the most flexibility, and have the highest will save. But that's where, as long as you customize your character as you see fit, you can kind of, put weaknesses where they might be and bring something else up. But like I mentioned, this is not a video for how you should customize your soldier. Same thing with a scout or even a scoundrel. Those of you that are watching, if you have played the game, it's up to you how you guys want to go about your own build, that sort of thing. This is not that kind of video. It's more of a rundown rather than that. But that's basically the best way that I can sum up about the soldier is they're primarily a tank. That's basically what they're about. They're the best at melee combat, that sort of thing. They get access to every single feat, all that kind of stuff. Scout is the best way to sum up about the scout is they're kind of like a attack. I call them like a tactician, but basically they're they're a combination of they sort of strike a balance between the soldier and the scoundrel when it comes to gameplay and that sort of thing. Some people say that that's kind of what they kind of fit. So it doesn't really explain every single thing about the scout, but that's kind of the easiest way to do it. They're a little bit quicker, I would say, with the soldier, but they can dish out a little bit more damage. For example, could say than a scoundrel. Not much more, but just a little bit. Now, they can't quite take the same amount of damage in battle that a soldier can do, but they're not too far behind. However, scouts actually have the highest willpower save and highest wisdom in the game. So, depending on what Jedi path you guys want to go, the Jedi Sentinel or even Jedi Consular is actually a really good fit either way. But you can even play a scout and go Jedi Guardian as long as you know what you're doing. You guys can go about this game as you see fit. Finally, the Scoundrel. This class is all about speed and things like that as opposed to strength. They have the quickest reflexes and they possess the highest intelligence. That doesn't say much, but I'll come back to them, like I said, in each of them to sort of break the rundown. So once you get an idea, the thing about scoundrels is they have the lowest health also, and they can't take they take the least amount of damage compared to the three. But as long as you customize them as you see fit, you can get through the game. Your first time through anyway, regardless of which base class you start with, it's always going to be a little bit of a struggle for your first time. So that's just kind of the way it goes. Okay. So once you get an idea of where you want to go with your character, you just come down to selecting. Okay. You get quick character and then you get custom character. Quick character, if you hit this option, for example, basically what it would do, it would automatically go with the game's recommended settings, and then you would just select the portrait and name. Most people wouldn't recommend this because you had no input on this, so I would go back out. So what you want to do is you want to go into custom character, and this is for any base class. Okay. It's not so much because I'm just showing a scout. You can do this for everybody. I'm just giving you a basic rundown rather than just go over everything. Okay, so once you select who you want, and then just kind of go from there. I'll just leave it on her since I do kind of like her a little bit. All right, now following things after that, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. You have attributes, skills, and feats. Let me go over attributes first and what they all mean. Okay. When you first come into your character area, this is by far the most important thing that for every base class in this game. Now, most of these attributes kind of explain what they are, but I'll give a short little version of them. Strength basically measures your ability to dish out damage and improves your chances of hitting. Dexterity helps basically your defense. It helps improve your agility, speed, and things like that. Constitution represents your health. Intelligence, they say it has to do with knowledge and all that kind of stuff, but basically, to sum up, what it means is the more intelligence you have, the more skill points you get, that sort of thing when you level up. Scouts and scoundrels definitely get more than a soldier, but they all get at least one skill point most of the time when they level up. And that's what intelligence mostly is. Wisdom represents willpower. And those of you guys that like to see the Force, wisdom and charisma sort of kind of go hand in hand with that. Those of you guys that are more, you like Force lightning and that sort of stuff, you like to see more of that. These two sort of kind of play hand in hand. Now, charisma is a little bit different, somewhat. This is more or less adds to your Force related feats and modifiers and modifies them, kind of gives them an extra little bit of a punch, if you will. But it also improves your ability to talk and be persuasive and things like that. So that's kind of what charisma means. Now, okay, so now that you basically all get a rundown of each one, how should you go about leveling them? What do I need to do with these attributes? What do I put up first? Well, first, what you need to understand is that you have 30 points remaining. Each time you go up, you take 1 point away. If I decide to go from strength to 10, now I don't have a negative modifier anymore. What this -1 means is that it's a negative. So let's say if you're using a melee weapon, for example, you won't really have any effect on anything. And if you do, it wouldn't really be much. You would be more or less often missing more often than you would be hitting. So if I go up to 10, for example, what this line means is that, well, there's no modifier on it. I don't get anything, but I'm also not losing anything in return. At the same time, though, because you don't have a modifier, uh, your chances of hitting sometimes can be a little bit 50-50. Sometimes you'll hit, sometimes you won't hit. So it just depends. But I want you to notice something. From going from 8 to 10, it cost me 2 points, even though there's really nothing on it. I mentioned about the points. Okay. Each time you go up with, if you want to go to +1, now if I go all the way from that took about 4 points. So go from 30 to 12, go from 8 to 12 to give me a +1. It cost me about 4 points to go from that. So let's say let's say if I turn all my attributes up to 10, for example, okay, I turn every single one up to 10. I still now have about 18 points. The higher you go, the more something costs. So let's say if I go to +2 for strength, okay, I still have now, because it took me 2 more points to go to that, and it also cost me an additional 2 points. Uh, you know, it continues to go up the higher you put something. So it's kind of like there's different ways you. This is where you have to. It's like, okay, those of you that know what you're doing and you got an idea, a broad basis of where you want to go. That's where you put points and where the rest where you want them to go, and that sort of thing. Dexterity, as I mentioned, that's just so. If I want to bring this up, all of a sudden now it costs me another 4 points to go up to 14. I still need to get my constitution up because this is kind of important. Because the more constitution you have, at least on +1, it improves your chances of being. You'll be able to take more damage and things like that in battle. Intelligence, as I mentioned, the higher this is, the more skill points you have. Since I'm showing it on a scout, you don't necessarily have to level this, but you can if you want to. Wisdom, I mentioned about willpower, things like that. When you become a Jedi, it's just somewhat important for you. So you're definitely going to want to turn this up. So it's kind of like, so now you have, after you do all that, you got 4 more points to put for something else. But notice, each time I put something else, it costs me an additional point each time that I put something up. And it's all the same for pretty much everybody. If I go over, for example, I do this with a soldier, it's the same thing. Since the soldier's strength more or less lies in strength, if let's say you want to get the full max, you want to go to +3. Well, that costs me, you know, to go from all the way to this, from 30 points, it cost me about 20. It took it all the way down, basically took 10 points away. So it cost me basically 10 points to go all the way to 16 with strength. So after that, but if you're okay with this, that's fine. I'm just giving you guys a rundown. Okay, if you want to max this and put it, well, the max, actually, you can go all the way to +4. I don't recommend this for first timers, but you can do it. But let's say, okay, you just turned it up to 16. Now it would just come down to what you want to put points for everything else. Um, Dexterity, while it's not as important for a soldier, it still could help them to be a little bit more mobile here and there. So it's okay to at least turn some points for that, right? And, now it would come down to your constitution. Do you want to go with 12 or do you want to go 14? It's all up to you. Intelligence, some people, when they play a soldier, don't necessarily care about this. That's fine. If you want to leave it negative, if you want to leave it -10, that's fine. If you guys know this game. However, you are going to want to bring your wisdom up a little bit and your charisma. Because when you do become a Jedi, these two sort of play a role with each other, as I mentioned. And then after that, it would just come down to what you want to put a point into rest. So there you go. And then you still would have 1 more point for something else. And there you go. And it's almost similar to what the default gives you, except my intelligence is down, and then the wisdom is still up, and charisma is still up. So it all depends on you. I'm just giving a basic example of basically if you go about a soldier, a lot of people tend to do this sometimes with the soldier class. I see a lot of people tend to keep their intelligence basically where it is sometimes. But there are other people that don't always do that. Some people actually do turn this up if you're the type, like I mentioned. Now, the downside about the soldier class, though, even if, let's say, I turn this up, for example, you still, when it comes to most level ups, you still only, on average, most of the time, only get 1 skill point. Once in a while, because you have the +2 modifier, you might get 2 on occasion, but most of the time, it's usually only 1. So, most people, because of that reason, a lot of people tend to leave it at least about this range if they don't go any lower. If they do go any intelligence at all, this is usually about the highest I see a lot of people go sometimes. But you don't have to do this. Like I said, this is not a recommendation kind of video. This is just an example. It's up to you guys how you want to go about distributing. So now that you got a basic idea of how it all works, okay, it just comes down to different things. If I go over, if I want to try a scoundrel, it's all pretty much the same basic kind of concept, But because they have a lower bit of health, you might want to turn this up first, right? But it depends. Some people don't always do that. Some people turn up strength. Some people turn up this. Since the scoundrel's main strength lies in their ability with speed and dexterity, some people tend to turn this all the way up and only put a couple points into strength sometimes. But again, it's all up to you how you want to do it. Usually, if I play as a scoundrel, I kind of do something in this range. But I'm not saying you guys have to do this, but this is what I do when I play a scoundrel. I do something in this range. Uh, and then after that, after you exit, this is what it would look like if I go with a scoundrel build. If I go over for a scout and I do a similar kind of build like I just showed you with the scoundrel. Uh, this is kind of what it would look like. Okay, so it would give me, I got 3 in fortitude this time, reflex and will. Now, what did these things down at the bottom mean? Now, fortitude means how much your character can take in battle. By having this 3, that's actually pretty respectable starting out. My reflex has to do with what I mentioned about speed and how what agility I have. And will has to do with not just force powers and things like that, but it also basically helps how resistant you can be towards negative status effects that can be used against you, or even force powers, for example. Uh, the higher your will save is, the more you'll be able to resist. Your character will be able to resist certain things that might get used against them sometimes. Sometimes they'll still have an effect, but if they do have an effect, it might not last very long, or something like it. Everything from being stunned to being poisoned. There's so many different things that can kind of play with that, and there's different ways you can go with it. But basically, the more you turn up your wisdom, it's not just to help increase the potency of your force powers, but it also helps, like I said, helps improve you to be resilient. So that's kind of what that does. So now that I kind of explained attributes, what is the next thing after that? Some of you hope you guys are following along. Hopefully I try to explain it as best I can. Just keep in mind about your attributes that every time you go up for something, each one costs 2 points. So let's say I want to put my strength, I want to go, I like the idea of being able to chance to hit, but I want to be able to inflict a little bit more damage. Okay, so if you want to, let's say, you want to turn it up by 2 more points, not only does this improve your chances of hitting, but you do cause a little bit more damage. Okay, but it cost me 2 points to go up to that. So now it just comes down to, it's up to you how you see fit. If you're okay with this, by all means, try it. Just keep in mind that each time you take up another attribute, they each all cost something each time you move them. And it's the same thing if you go back in reverse. It'll give you, if you take something back, it'll basically give you a couple points that you might want to put something else, for example. Since scouts and I'm just giving this for people that play the game. Since scouts and scoundrels tend to get more skill points when they level up in a soldier, when I play as this class, I tend to keep this down to about like this range. That way I can focus my points into other areas. I can put a focus on something else, and I still have points to put for something else if I want to. By having my intelligence now like this, now some people might ask, well, what does all this do for you? What is it, just for skill points? Or I mean, it's not just for skill points. They say intelligence is supposed to be some add some kind of minor benefits when by the time you become a Jedi, but it's usually very minor. At the end of the day, though, when you become a Jedi, your wisdom and charisma is more or less really going to matter more so than I would say your intelligence does. What this more or less does is that the higher your intelligence, the more skill points you basically have. Now, there are other benefits I would say with what intelligence does give. By having a +1, it gives you an extra bonus. So let's say you'll have more of a chance of performing a certain task rather than not being able to perform a certain task. But because you do have other party members in the game, they also tend to get other skills that you can also give for yourself, for example, something like it. But this is just basically a basic rundown of what I'm about to say. But I'll turn the intelligence up just to kind of give a broad idea of what you guys want to do. But this is just kind of an example. Okay. So after that, now that you guys have an idea, let me go on to skills. So hopefully that pretty much gives you a basis. It doesn't matter what base class you go with, just go about the attributes as you see fit. You know, the more strength you have, yes, it improves your chances of hitting. However, dexterity also can help aid in that area as well. Now, it doesn't necessarily improve your chances of hitting, but by having more reflex, basically, let's say, okay, for example, let's say I didn't decide to put a modifier with my strength. What happens if I took it down from +1 to just a little line? Let's say, okay, if I turn this up, for example, if I turn this all the way to 16 and give me +3, well, you still will miss a little bit, but because your reflex is a little bit quicker now, let's say I kind of do something in this range, right? I do something like this. I bring everything else up except for, you know, everything is maxed. I decided to keep my strength in this way. Now, I don't recommend this for anybody who's new starting. You're not really going to want to play with this. But those of you that have played, if you guys want to try something like this, go ahead. But uh, it mentions about dexterity more or less as modifiers to range attacks. Now, it's not just range attacks, to be quite honest with you. It does sort of help. The more your character can kind of dodge. Let's say, okay, even though I might only have, let's say, a minus, because my dexterity is actually pretty high. If I exit out, for example, this is what it would give me. Just kind of an example for a scout, for example. It's 3 or fortitude. My reflex now it went from 4 to 5. So this improves my defense a little bit more. Even though the strength modifier might not have anything on it, even though it might only be down 1 point, I'll still be able to inflict some damage. Uh, Basically, what a +1 gives you, okay, if you not really understand what these modifiers do, basically a modifier adds an extra bonus attack, but it basically improves your chances of hitting, but it also adds an extra benefit. So let's say like the average Bible blade, for example, is I think is like 1 to 10 for the modifier, right? So somewhere in that range, you'll get different types of results. Sometimes you'll get the full amount, sometimes you'll get a little bit less. If you don't have a modifier, let's say the strength modifier is like 11 or like 10, now, you'll still sometimes will be able to hit, but it'll have a little bit less of effect. It will only average about what the character's class is based on. Since the scout doesn't inflict the most amount of damage out of a soldier, it will do a little bit less. And then the soldier with the same 11 modifier will hit just a little bit more. But by having a +1, now all of a sudden, I get the actual benefit now. By having this +1, it gives me a bonus to my melee attack skills. So it's kind of like the higher you go, the more you'll be able to increase your chances and the more you'll be able to inflict damage and that sort of thing. Because now I added 2 more extra bonus points on top of that, then it would go. This game is based on some kind of math. Some people kind of, I don't know, that's the basic way that some people kind of describe the way that this game the way that the people kind of describe this game. It's based on some kind of D20. I don't know. That's the base. That's the way that a lot of people tend to sum up this game. It's based on a lot of older D&D like Baldur's Gate. So the way you want to customize your character, to have them have a chance in battle is not, even though this is a tactical RPG, it's in real time. So basically, you give your character commands, and basically, whether they're holding a ranged weapon or a melee weapon, your your chances of hitting is determined by your strength score and their defense score. So let's say, okay, let's say because there's some enemies in the game that tend to have a higher reflex stat, and some of them have a higher fortitude. Some of them also have higher strength. It all just depends on what's what, you know. But usually, when I go for most builds, regardless of what class I play, I tend to go something in this range. But you guys don't have to do this. This is usually the way I set my characters up, usually. And it usually works out for me just fine. Okay, so now that you guys have an idea, let me now officially go on to skills. What are skills, since I kind of briefly mentioned about intelligence? Well, skills are basically abilities. Basically, each one, is they all kind of do different things. Computer use has to do with hacking and using computer spikes, that sort of thing. Um, if you put a point into this, for example, you can do everything from, you know, using electricity to zap everybody in a room, to disabling gun turrets, to just all kinds of things. So the more points you put into this, for example, the less computer spikes you would have to use. Now, since I'm showing you from the scout's perspective, they are actually the best at this class. But other people can use them as long as you put it in, as long as you put a point into it. Some people don't really care about this. Some people do. It just depends on your personal taste. You don't have to max it out if you don't want to. But with the scout, you can go all the way to 4 if you so desire. It just depends on what's what. Um, if you come down to demolitions, basically demolitions are basically little mines that are on the ground. Now, the way if you want to be able to use this ability, you're going to want awareness turned on because these two go hand in hand. Without awareness, you won't be able to spot them. You'll have to switch to another companion to be able to see them. Otherwise you'll run into them, and yeah, some of them could be pretty nasty, especially when you get to the late, uh, when you start getting to other places besides where you first start out in, you know. So if you go with that, awareness basically heightens your senses, basically, and you can also detect people if they're hidden by stealth. That's basically stealth is like a camouflage, basically. The more points you put into this, the more invisible to enemies around it that you become. Now, this is more of a cross-class skill. This isn't really necessarily something that's geared towards a scout per se, but you can use it. But basically, what it's for is you can basically, if the enemy doesn't detect you, you can kind of get a critical on people. That's kind of what it's for. But since a soldier and a scout don't really use it, I don't tend to put a point into this much or ignore it. I tend to ignore it most of the time. But these two definitely are kind of important skills to have, since they sort of kind of relate to each other. Persuasion, I mentioned about charisma. The better your charisma, the more it improves your chances of talking. But you don't want to neglect this if you want to talk at all, because it's important for all the classes, not just for a scoundrel, for example, even though that's more of a skill for them. But you can still I do think this is kind of important for everybody because you are going to talk to people in the game. And some of them are going to have a little bit of a persuasion icon. And if you go to hit it, sometimes your success of being able to be successful is determined by your charisma score and how many points you have in persuasion and things like that. Repair skill, so that pretty much explains what it is, what that is. It's pretty only your character gets the skill. None of your party members get this, so you can't switch to another character to basically use this particular skill. Even if you use them to go up and talk to somebody, the game will automatically have your character show up rather than them. So now there are times where your character they will talk certain times in the game, later on in the game when you're in different places, but it's usually only small, very minor times, mostly. So yeah. As far as I know, I don't think they get the persuade option with those dialogue choices. It's mostly just normal dialogue, as far as I remember. And if you come down to repair skill has to do more with droids and mechanical devices, things like that. Uh, what to kind of give to basically sum up this, what this is more or less for is, let's say you got a disabled combat droid just kind of sitting there not moving. If you have enough repair parts, for example, you can basically kind of use it to go and attack people and things like that. But it's also for when you get other droid companions, for example, a T3 droid. Having some things like this, having a pointed to this, uh, will reduce the number of repair parts that would cost you to basically use certain ones to use basically on mechanical devices, stuff like that. Basically, that's basically what it's mostly for. That's kind of the best way to sum it up. Some people think the repair skill is not that good to have, but it's up to you. Some people actually find it actually really good. There is a certain type of droid that you can get later in the game. It's like an HK kind of droid, but it costs you quite a bit of repair skills to actually be able to do it, and you need a certain amount of persuasion. Uh, but the nice thing about a scout, since I'm showing you from the scout's perspective, I can actually max this out at the beginning if I decide I want to go for him. And that's kind of nice if you want to do that. Security, this is a pretty self-explanatory one, but to give a basic rundown what security is, really, if you have a point into this, any door that's basically locked or a container that's locked, you'll be able to use this on it and open the door. Now, there are other ways you can open a door. And same thing with a locked chest, for example. You can use a melee weapon to kind of bash them. Some people prefer that, some people don't. It's all up to you. But basically, if you have at least one point into this, you can use it. I tend to favor this over the idea of using a melee weapon because it takes longer. So, I don't know. I mean, when you get a lightsaber, it can kind of go a little bit faster, but with a melee weapon, it tends to vary a little bit. So, but I'm the type that kind of prefers it. But it's up to you guys if you don't care for it as much. And then finally, we have treat injury. Treat injury is kind of important for everybody because putting a point into this will basically allow you to use less med packs to when it comes to healing yourself and things like that. Meaning, what it means is that it won't. You could use just a normal med pack, and it will give you quite a bit of health. But the more you have in the treat, the more points you put into this, the less med packs you would have to use when it comes to leveling up. And since my wisdom is sitting at 12, I got a +1 to it. That gives me an extra bonus benefit on top of that. So that's actually pretty handy to have. So that's it. And then when it comes after that, it just comes down to what you want to put a point into, and then just fill out the rest. Now, if I go over to soldier because they have a lower intelligence, for example, they don't necessarily get as high of a skill point for them. Some people don't really care about it as much for a soldier class, but I just want to give an example. Okay, how many the soldier can get if let's say, okay, I do something similar to what I just showed you. How many do I get? Oops, I didn't mean to turn that up. How many do I get? Well, if I go all the way to +2, for example, that costs me 2 points. Okay. But let's say I just go down by 1, and okay, I turn something else up. Let's say like my constitution. If I go with 12 in intelligence for a soldier, it gives me a total of 8 points. Not very many. You might notice, some of you guys that are kind of watching that are new, you might notice that there aren't that many with a soldier. However, even though you might not have that many, you can still put up the things that you see fit. Some people actually don't mind this. Um, Now, after this, you won't get nearly as many. Now, if I want to get the full, uh, how many can I get altogether? Well, I never tried an 18 intelligence. I'm not telling anybody to do this, but I just want to see. I'm just curious how many the soldier actually gets. So I'm just kind of curious of what they would actually get for this. So just kind of bear in mind. All right, I don't know. I wouldn't like that though. But so they got 20. Wow, to get 20 skill. My goodness, man. I would imagine their intelligence would be really good. They'd probably be that's a really smart soldier, if I'm being honest. But man, oh man, putting all the way to 18 finally gave me 20 skill points. I would not recommend this at all for anybody. regardless, even if you are the type that kind of likes to have some skill points, things like that. Now, I would imagine because I gave myself a +4, maybe I might get 2 skill points at that point, or maybe 3. It's kind of similar like what you get with a scout and a scoundrel. That would not be worth it for a soldier. So, if you want to go with the soldier, the most I would do with them, if you want to have a little bit more to start with, I wouldn't go any higher than 12. Some people tend to go less than that, but it's up to you guys how you want to do it. But they definitely get the least amounts for certain. Uh, and then if you come over, the scoundrel actually gets the most. I'm actually curious how high theirs actually goes because I never actually seen how many. Let me see how high theirs could actually go. My goodness, 32. Jesus, my goodness, man. Wow. You couldn't even get anywhere near that with that would be if you're talking about overkill already, 32, what would I do with 32 skill points? I mean, maybe you could put it for just about everything. Look at that. And that still would really be worth it in the long run because, well, I mean, it automatically just put points into just about everything. But I would like that in the grand scheme of things because, I don't know. It's some people might like that. Maybe if there were a couple mods out there that would allow you to maybe put a couple max for different things, and maybe you could put something else. But as far as I know, I don't think there are any mods out there that can increase this kind of stuff for you. But if you're the type that kind of likes to have some skill points and things like that, even then, I still wouldn't really do it. 'Cause I mentioned about how you have companions and things like that. I would really I wouldn't really like that kind of setup. But I just wanted to see what it would look like with them. So, okay. So let me just kind of go back. So now that you guys have an idea of how skills work, it's up to you guys how you guys want to go about it. It's all up to you guys for that particular point. And then after that, once you select what skills you want for each class, and then it just comes down to what you want to put for something else. It just depends on what class I'm playing as. It just comes down from there. After that, now finally we get the feats. Feats is kind of an interesting one. It's not easy to explain what feats are, but basically they're an extra. You can get basically extra attack for yourself, basically, because you have normal attack, and then you have what is called feats. Now, not every feat is an attack. For example, since I'm showing you from the scoundrel perspective, they start out with critical strike, and they get also what is called sniper shot. The soldier gets power blast, and they get power attack. If you start with a scout, they get rapid shot, and they get what is called flurry. Basically, these are additional attack options. Basically, that's what they are. And not all of them are for attack. Some of them are for other things, like armor, for example. Since I'm showing you from a scoundrel, they only start at light armor, but if you want others, then you kind of have to go up. Soldiers get all 3 of these automatically checked out the first when you go with them. You also get what is called 2-weapon fighting. Basically, if you decide you want to use 2 weapons, putting a point into this will basically reduce the penalty of using both rather than just one. And dueling focuses more or less on single one-handed melee weapons and ranged weapons rather than going with 2. So the more you go up, the higher your single weapon skills basically kind of go up. It gives you a little bit of an additional attack bonus, basically, but that's all predicated on your strength modifier. So it kind of adds to it a little bit, sort of. But 2-weapon fighting does hit harder. But it just depends. Some people say that this going with a single weapon is more precise. Yeah, to be honest, in real world, what I played is both. They seem to be about, from what I notice anyway. The only thing I notice with the 2 is you tend to give up a little bit more defense when you go with 2-weapon fighting, from what I notice. But you tend to hit harder, from what I notice, just a little bit. That's something I've noticed anyway. Especially if you go with a double-bladed lightsaber, for example. You definitely hit harder, from what I notice. Something like it. But I mentioned, there's other things, like there's also extra skills. These types of feats basically add to your skills. These are basically skill feats rather than attack feats. But they all do different things. conditioning, for example, basically helps you be a little bit more resistant to negative status effects and that sort of thing. That's kind of what this more means. If you put a point into this, for example, and basically can basically have certain things be a little bit less resistant on you. It won't have as much of an effect. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. So the higher you go, the more you improve your conditioning, the more you'll be able to resist certain things that might happen against you sometimes. Sometimes it still doesn't. Honestly, master conditioning, some people say that don't always go with this. If you go with a Jedi Guardian or Jedi Sentinel, Jedi Counselor route, I would say these two could actually be similar to what you get with a Jedi Sentinel, for example, since they get grants to certain types of force immunities and things like that. But while these don't really make you immune to anything, it basically improves your conditioning. That's sort of it plays sort of a role with willpower, sort of kind of thing. So that pretty much explains kind of what feats are. And then after that, it just comes down to, okay, once you select something and it just kind of go from there. It all depends on what you want to do. It just depends on what kind of class I want to go for, what Jedi path I want to select. It's all up to you at the end of the day. And then you just name your character and it just kind of go into the game from there. So, yeah. Now I'll show you a little bit of some gameplay so you get an idea of what you can expect in the game, and then I'll just kind of go ahead and wrap it up and call it apart, since this video is getting a little bit longer than I intended. Okay, so we are in the game. I just basically kind of fast forwarded a little bit. And I basically wanted to give a little rundown of once you come into the game, since this is a very early part of the game where everything kind of starts from. I figured to kind of give a rundown on each of these little things that you kind of come into the game. The very first thing when you hit your start button, since I'm showing this on the Xbox, I have to use my controller, but if you guys have a PC, you probably have to hit a different button, but it all works out the same. Each of these kind of has different things. You have implants, you have head accessories, you have something with hands. I don't exactly know how this one works, but it's some type of accessory, that's all I know. But they're different things. For your right arm and left arm, you can put different things on, like energy shields, for example, to other types of wristbands that you can kind of get. This middle one represents your body. It's pretty obvious from what I'm wearing, but just to give you a basic rundown. It's clothing, and then this is another accessory I have at the bottom, and then I'm using a range gun on this. Now, I want to give a little bit of a tip. On the first Kotor, you can only equip one weapon at a time. You can't use two weapons and a ranged weapon at the same time. So let's say I decided to switch from my ranged weapon. I cannot put my gun in my other hand. I don't know. Now in Kotor 2, you can kind of map them and switch back and forth between a melee weapon and ranged weapon, but you can't do that in this one. So if you want to use one or the other, you have to switch them both times. Now you can use a blaster. You could use both a ranged weapon and shoot both hands, but not a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. So let's say, okay, if I go back to this, if I get another short sword or a long sword, for example, I can put it in this hand if I so choose. And that I already kind of went over what two weapon fighting means when I was explaining about the feats. But I'm going to just go back to that, so I'll just switch back to my blaster real quick. Now, if we go over to this page, I don't really have too much of anything here, but this is basically your inventory and items that you basically have. Since you're just kind of starting out, you don't really have a whole lot of anything other than just what you have on you. So, but as you go throughout the game, you'll get other things that you'll get, things like that. So it pretty much explains what they are. If you get new items, they'll kind of be highlighted, things like that. If you go over here, this is where this is our level up screen when you gain a level, but these are the attributes. See how I customized my character, the way that I did it with here. This is basically what it would show up. If this is the way that so that pretty much explains what it is. They also show your alignment from light and dark. If you guys played any kind of Mass Effect game, there's really no different in here. If you guys know anything about Paragon and renegade, that sort of thing. Just think of it more in the Star Wars sense of light side, dark side. Not too much of a difference, I would say. But I would say compared to Mass Effect, the light side is more or less exactly what it says you're going to be going, and the dark side is exactly what it says. So that's about it. Then the next screen basically shows your skills and your feats. Now, if you have something, let's say you selected a certain type of skill, it'll at least show up. If you have a bonus, you'll get a bonus point for different ones that you have something in, depending on what's what, and it all does different things. So if you didn't put something into a skill, then it'll just be a blank and you won't have anything on it. So some of them will have different things. And then if you go over to feats, now uh, when it comes to feats, it will only show you what you have. It won't show anything else. So whatever you selected will be over in this particular section, and it just kind of looks like this. So whatever you selected, as time goes along, the more feats you pick up, and things like that, the more stuff you'll be able to see as time goes along. And then over here is your message and all that. It's like a feedback thing. And this particular page is where you can come with different things for main quest stuff to side quests. You'll have different things that'll basically pop up here. You can get completed quests if you've already did something. It'll be checkmarked as far as I'm aware, and then it just kind of comes like that. And then finally, this is where this particular page is your map, but this is also where you can access your party selection screen. So if you want to take somebody else with you, you can choose to take somebody. That's basically how it works. Now, there's certain times in the game where you won't always be able to switch companions. Sometimes it depends on where you are. Certain times, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. It just depends. But basically, that pretty much explains pretty much how everything pretty much all works. So you guys pretty much know what to expect now. So it's up to you guys how you want to go about customizing your own. I just basically laid out pretty much the attributes, went over skills, went over pretty much everything, how you can go about your character. It's all up to you at the end of the day, how you want to go about it. But before I let you guys go, the first attack is your main attack. This is just the default. And then over here is your feat. So whatever your feats are, you'll be able to select these. So it's just different ones. So it's just an example. They just kind of go from there. So with that, guys, yeah, that's pretty much all I have for this video. So give some likes, dislikes, whether you guys think I could have done better or explain things in a better way. Like I said, I will go over the classes individually, but not in this particular video. Hopefully I will try to make it as long as I did this video. I didn't intend to go this long, but I wanted to try to be as detailed as I can be with this sort of thing. So other than that, I don't really have anything else to say for it. So with that, guys, have a good one.